Hey everyone, and welcome to my review of the new Saints Row Reboot. I've clocked a total of about 40 hours into this game over the past few weeks, and I want to discuss in as much detail as possible my experience while playing. Now, this isn't going to be one of those reviews where I just instantly trash the game saying, haha, woke game equals garbage. No. I'm going to be going through and discussing each part of the game in depth, going over the parts that I did and didn't like. Because there are some things about this game that I do enjoy. So if you were maybe on the fence about this game, maybe you're not sure whether you want to pick it up or not, hopefully this review can help you make that decision. I should also make it clear right away that I'm reviewing the Series X version of the game. There may be certain bugs and glitches that you come across that only happen on the other consoles, which obviously would not get mentioned because I'm reviewing the Series X version. So let's start off right away by discussing the story. The story is probably the most underwhelming aspect of this game. I'm gonna put it bluntly, it's just not good. None of the characters you ever really grow to care about over the course of the game. They have the brand new cast in the reboot, and the way they're written feels like it's what old people think Gen Z are, and for the vast majority of the game, it's just extremely cringy and silly. You have Nina, who's into cars, who used to be with the Panteros gang, Kevin, who likes to cook, who also has affiliations with the Idols gang, and Eli, who is the kind of nerd, smart guy of the group. And of course, they all have the typical quirky sense of humor, and seemingly an unhealthy obsession with karaoke.
It's got 5 stars, a huge tequila selection, and karaoke!
Oh man, it's been ages since we've done karaoke.
You don't ever really get much backstory into each character. The most backstory you get is from Nina, but even that is just a single cutscene in the entire game. Aside from the main characters, there's one of the villains, Atticus Marshall, the Nawali, who is probably the most hardened and serious character out of the whole cast in this game. And I know Saints Row has always been kind of a goofy game in terms of its story, at least Saints Row 3 and 4. To me, this feels about in between those two games on the goofiness meter. I just couldn't stop thinking in the cutscenes a lot of the time that it felt like I was watching a sitcom and there could be just like a laugh track placed after each joke the characters say. I know it's been kind of a popular meme, but it is true. Like, it seriously feels like that.
Are you gonna help me get the waffle maker or not?
As an investor, I don't like wasting money.
You're wearing a fucking bow tie.
Okay, I will throw in $20 for a waffle maker.
Nina?
Good for 10?
Who helped you move your forged paintings last month?
Fine, 15.
What sort of waffle maker can I get for $35?
Presumably one that makes fucking waffles.
Hey, the wage slave is back!
How was your first day? Were the other mercenaries nice to you?
You know, as far as hired killers go, I'd give him a 7.
You look like you could use a mimosa.
Thanks, Eli.
Seriously, how's the job?
It's the murder business. The fundamentals don't change, just the uniform.
I can tell you love it.
Okay, I don't have to love it. I have to pay my student loans.
Amen.
So I'm guessing that means the pay's good.
It's supposed to be. Got stiffed on my bonus today.
Dude, what the fuck?
I played a little fast and loose on the job, and, well, my CO wasn't a fan.
You gotta be kidding me.
Swear to God, this lady walked right off the set of an 80s action movie. I was half expecting her to call me Rook and threaten to take my badge.
Are we gonna make rent?
We'll make rent. We just gotta be a little more creative.
Last time we got creative, I got stabbed 3 times.
Hey, it would've been 4 times if Nina and I hadn't shown up.
It would have been 0 times if you were on time.
This is true. Look, this is really not a big deal. We just knock off a payday loan place. No one gives a shit if people rob those bastards.
You have a job now. You could actually just take the loan.
Eli, I don't do business with morally bankrupt companies.
You work for Marshall.
Brunch is a time for friends and mimosas, not debates on morality.
All right.
Man, this is really fucking good, Kev.
Thanks. I was worried I added too much pepper.
No, seriously, this is perfect. The only way this could be better is if you put on a fucking shirt.
Dinner and a show, baby.
95% of the humor does not land. It's just cheesy, stereotypical Gen Z shit. And this is coming from someone who is a Gen Zer, and I'm saying that. I could count on one hand the amount of times I genuinely laughed at the humor. Most of the time I was just laughing because it's just so goofy and stupid. Kind of like a way of just dealing with secondhand embarrassment. For the other gangs, you also don't really learn too much about them, especially their leaders. The Panteros leader is Sergio, who only appears like 3 times throughout the game, and you don't even get a big boss fight against him either. The Idols, I can't even tell you who their leader is. It's like the Collective or something. And Marshall, obviously, is Atticus Marshall. He's the leader. You learn that at the very beginning of the game. And Marshall has striking similarities to Stag and Saints Row 3. They're both like private military groups with semi-futuristic tech. They even both have their own style of tank. The Idols are a lot like the Deckers with the obsession with neon lights, and they're kind of like a hacker gang, or like technology focused, I guess you could say. They just don't feel entirely unique in my opinion. The story is also quite short. It's only around 10 hours, and it almost doesn't really feel like there's a beginning, middle, and end. I'm not going to spoil anything related to the plotline in this review, but you get to a point where you're like, oh, this is the last mission? Because it comes up so abruptly, and then that's it. So yeah, the story, not very good, very subpar. Moving on to the gameplay, you would think that since this is a reboot, that the gameplay would feel vastly overhauled, right? Unfortunately, that's not really the case. It feels exactly like a standard Saints Row game from like 10 years ago, which I guess you could take that as they're sticking to the original Saints Row formula, or as a complaint like they didn't bother to overhaul any gameplay systems to make it feel different like a brand new game or series reboot should. They did add in some new features to kind of mix up the gameplay with the skills and perks along with the flow system. Flow is kind of like this power meter that fills up as you get kills in combat, and you need flow to be able to activate skills that you get as you level up. These can range from putting a grenade down an enemy's pants and throwing them, tossing a grenade in general, to putting up a force field that allows you to shoot enemies through walls. However, at least for me, I felt like a lot of these were just a big gimmick and a waste of time to perform. Except for the grenade down the enemy's pants one, that one you can use on some of the tougher enemies like the idle flag twirlers, for instance, because they'll just sit there in your face and spin those fuckers over and over again, and you could just skip the animation entirely by chucking an A down their pants. The reason I call them flag twirlers is, well...
Flag twirlers, let's move! Come on, move!
Other than that, the only other one I found myself spamming was the one that just gives you increased health for a limited time. That one's really strong. It essentially makes you invincible. Like, you're not going to die if you keep spamming this. The other system is the perk system, and these you unlock via the challenges that you can find on the missions app in your phone. Each time you complete a challenge, you basically unlock one new perk, and as you get later into the game, it sometimes takes you 2 challenges to unlock the new perks. There are 3 tiers, with the first tier giving you little bonuses, the second tier being the medium one, and the third, the elite status, giving you some very big bonuses. The best way I can describe these perks are kind of like the perks in Call of Duty. They don't entirely change your gameplay like an RPG would. They just give you little benefits. For example, a minor perk allows you to move faster when closer to death, or increase your reload speed when landing headshots. Small things like that. The medium tier allows you to dual-wield SMGs and pistols, which is actually one of the best perks in the entire game. I put it on the moment I unlocked it, and I don't think I ever took it off after that. And personally, I don't like that this is a perk because I feel like it's kind of a crutch. It's way more powerful than any of the other perks are. I feel like this should have been something that you unlock in some other fashion. And at the top tier, the elite, you have the most impactful perks, and the one I used was the one that basically gives you 2 health bars back after you lose all your health. It reminds me a lot of the Path of the Nomad ability from The Division, where if you run out of health, it'll give you like a little boost of health back, but it operates on a cooldown, so you can't use it every so often. The gunplay in Saints Row is very cartoony and I guess like Fortnite-ish. It also relies heavily on auto-aim. The free aim is not going to feel good to use. Like if you don't use the lock-on feature, you're probably going to struggle a lot in gunfights. The guns also have a lot of bloom, so it's really hard to be accurate with them, at least until you upgrade them all the way. They also got rid of running takedowns like in the previous Saints Row games. Now what you have to do is wait until the takedown meter is filled up before you can walk up to an enemy and perform a finisher, and you can accelerate this process by taking down more enemies. The more enemies you kill, the faster the bar is going to fill. This is also the only way you can refill your health in combat, and I actually quite like the finisher animations. There are a lot of them, and they're pretty satisfying too. I only wish you could maybe choose which ones your character performs, or maybe you have like a certain fighting style that could be applied that only let your character do those types of animations. Outside of the finisher animations though, the melee combat feels god-awful. It is truly terrible. There's only one combo you can do for each class of melee weapons. You have the bigger one and the smaller one. And you also have a heavy attack for each class too. The heavy attack, for some reason, it feels like it does less damage than a regular attack does. And it's hard to even land the heavy attack sometimes. The tracking on it is just so awful. Your guy will just swing a different direction entirely away from the enemy. And then you have a really awkward wait time for the animation to complete. The enemies also have just really strange iframes where the weapon will physically hit them and you'll get the feedback like you did hit the enemy, but they will just take no damage from the swing. This happens all the time in the kick animation and it makes for a horrible experience. Somehow GTA San Andreas from 2004 manages to have better melee combat than Saints Row in 2022. There are, however, some really funny weapons you can unlock, like the Thrustbuster, which is like this football that basically sends enemies and vehicles flying away in random directions. And if you attach it to a helicopter, it is genuinely a hilarious sight to see. There's also these dual-wield punching melee weapons that are essentially pistols, but they throw out little fists instead, and you can just sit there punching the shit out of the enemies, and that's really fun. Aside from the special weaponry, a lot of the guns from the old Saints Row games come back, like the Krukov, the AR-55, the Togo 13 sniper, the Ultimax shotgun, the MP7, and the Vector lookalikes. But there's also some new weapons like the Thompson, for example, which in my opinion is one of the best guns in the entire game for DPS. Every gun in this game comes with a new ability that you can unlock by completing a certain challenge with that weapon. For example, getting idle double kills, getting triple kills, or taking down a certain enemy type with that weapon. And the Thompson gets an ability where it does more damage to tougher targets, so those yellow bar enemies just get shredded by this gun, especially when dual wielding it, and it's a lot of fun. I have no complaints about any of the abilities really. I think they make some of the guns a lot more fun to use, which is great. The core gameplay loop of Saints Row lies within the criminal ventures. After you reach a certain part in the story where you take over the Saints base, you get access to these criminal ventures that you can place, which unlock more side activities to do to then complete that criminal venture. As you get more and more criminal ventures placed around the map, you increase your hourly income and progress through the game. These technically are separate from the main missions, but they're also connected to the main story missions at the same time, which I will explain more about in a second here. And these can give you some cool unlocks for playing through them. For example, if you complete the Jim Rob's venture, you unlock the ability to call your car in next to you. And to do that, you have to grab a series of vehicles scattered around the map and drive them back to the garage each time. I believe there are around 11 or so cars you have to find, so it gets a bit tedious going to grab them and driving each back individually to the garage. I have not completed all of the criminal ventures. I've completed about 3 or 4 of them. And the most tedious one by far, though, is Future Bright. This one, you have to go and bring back 14 trucks around the map carrying toxic waste. And on the way back, you have to avoid crashing into anything, otherwise you'll spill some of the waste out. It's not the end of the world. If you do lose some, you'll just get less money in the end when you get back. But this venture was probably the most tedious thing to do out of all of them. It honestly felt like I was grinding GTA Online driving these just slow-ass trucks around the map. I was getting some serious Vietnam flashbacks with the post-op cell mission. Fortunately, it's not quite that slow, but you know what I mean. The best venture by far, though, is the Eurekabator one. This is the technology one, and is the one that feels like it's different each time. Each mission for this venture has you testing out new tech, and this is where you get that magical football that I showed off earlier. You get a hoverboard that you can use to cause chaos with, which is a lot of fun, and also the force field that lets you shoot through walls comes from this venture. And each mission here has you doing something completely different, which is why it just stands out to me. Every other venture felt like it was just the same activity, just plastered in a different spot around the map until you complete the required number. It would have been so awesome if each venture had their own mini storyline mission strand to it, with new characters and a plot line, on top of unlocking the activities like grabbing the toxic waste trucks. I feel that would have given it so much more depth than what we have now. But the reason I say that this is all side content forced into the main story is because you'll eventually come to a wall in the main story if you don't complete the ventures. You'll have a mission requirement like complete 2 criminal ventures and place 5 of them or something like that. And you'll have to do that to progress through the story. There are also different criminal empire levels, and as you place more and more ventures and progress, you'll unlock the next set of ventures that will allow you to earn even more passive income. But the ones that earn you more money per hour also cost more to place down initially. As for the story missions themselves, they are very hit or miss. I would say a good half of them all play out very similar. You'll go somewhere and, oh no, bad guys will show up and you have to take them out. There's a lot of car roof shooting that takes place on the missions where you're just stuck on the rails of a vehicle and you have to just blow up a bunch of bad guys chasing you. But here and there, you'll get some nice action-packed missions. For example, you might rob a little train along the way, or you might break into a certain headquarters, maybe perform a little prison break or yacht raid. And it's in those missions where the game definitely shines. Those are definitely some of the best moments. But in between, you can have some really tedious ones where it's just go here and take out enemies. The vehicle gameplay is another place where I think the game somewhat shines. Now, the driving isn't very good, the physics are extremely unrealistic, but in an odd way, that's almost part of the fun. Getting in a monster truck and just crushing all the cars that you see, and getting the cops after you, only to do the same thing to their cars. Hopping on the hoverboard and just slamming into cars, smashing them up was so much fun, and you can even do the same thing to humans. You can send them flying with the hoverboard. Tank rampages are always going to be fun in pretty much any game you play, just causing a ton of destruction, and it felt so satisfying to just drive over cars and pancake them with the tank. Just like each weapon, each vehicle has a special ability that you can unlock by doing a specific challenge with said vehicle. A couple of examples of some of the abilities: there's a jump button that you can get, ejector seats, infinite nitrous boost. Every vehicle can also be fitted with a tow hook that you can use to drag almost anything you want behind you, and the physics with this are also busted, as you can imagine. But this also applies to helicopters. You can have an attack helicopter with a hook on it to carry things as well. One thing that really annoyed me with the vehicle physics, though, is if you accidentally flip over a car while driving, there's no way to flip it back over to continue using it, which for a game as wacky and unrealistic as Saints Row is kind of annoying. Even a game like GTA 5 has this mechanic, so it just feels really off with Saints Row not having it, especially given that the physics are so wacky. You also can hardly hear car engines in this game. They are so quiet. You can hop in one of the fastest supercars in the entire game, a vehicle you would think would have a loud-ass engine, and a pin dropping would tingle your eardrums more than a roar of a Lambo engine. Moving on to the next topic, we have customization. Saints Row has always had amazing customization. And since we were just talking about vehicles, let's start with the vehicle customization. The car customization is really good, just like it's always been in Saints Row. Each car has a plethora of body mods to choose from. You can change the window tint, the paint type, the shininess of the paint, the rim size, tire type, the horn, and even the engine note of the vehicle itself. Although I will admit that is pretty useless because, like I said, you need a stethoscope to even fucking hear the engine. And even for air vehicles, you can do a lot of the same things. Even some air vehicles have body mods for them. A lot of the vehicles have their own liveries for them as well. There's off-road kits you can apply, which will make the vehicle have a bit higher suspension along with some off-road tires. The car customization is great all across the board. There's even some things that I wish GTA 5 had that I wish they would take from Saints Row's book. What I'm even more impressed with, though, is the weapon customization. This game has some of the best weapon customization I think I've seen in any game. Not even joking. Each weapon has different parts that you can change the color of individually, and on each color you can choose exactly how shiny you want that color to be. For example, let's say you're making a gold color for a part of your weapon. You'd want to make it yellow, but then up the glossiness and metallicness to make it look like gold, to make it have some shine to it. On top of that, there are also different decals you can put on the gun, and there's more that you can unlock as you progress through the game. And with the decal, you can also change the colors of them and even the scale of the wrap itself. If you make it bigger, it looks like a completely different camo entirely and vice versa. It's really well done. They did a good job here. The only thing that's frankly missing from this is the ability to change attachments. In the past Saints Row games, when you upgraded weapons, they would get more attachments on them. The final upgrade for the Krukov, for example, would have this gigantic box mag on it. But in this game, weapons just appear stock as it would fully upgraded. Attachments never change, which is unfortunate, because the Thompson would have looked sick with a giant drum mag at its final upgrade. But instead, as you go through each upgrade level, the weapon never changes its appearance. But if you really don't like the look of a weapon, you can add what's called a visual mod, and you can transfer the look of one weapon to another weapon within the same class. So let's say you like the look of the Thompson, but you want the performance of the MP7s. You would then apply the Thompson visual mod to the MP7, and it would retain the same stats, like damage and rate of fire, but it would just look like the Thompson. And I think that's a cool little addition. I can't remember if this is in any of the older Saints Row games. I don't think it was. The unfortunate part, though, is this feature doesn't really work correctly at the moment, and really, the weapon customization in general has a big problem that I will discuss more into detail when we discuss optimization, issues, and bugs a little bit later down the line. The clothing customization and boss creator is also top-notch amazing. It is so entertaining to just go through the bosses that other people have made, because there are some really good ones that just cracked me up. The character creator is just amazing. I don't really have any negatives to say about this. They even went a step further with the customization this time around, because there's a criminal venture that you will eventually get while playing called Cutting Edge. And as you progress through the criminal venture, you unlock these materials that you can put on pretty much anything. Your clothing, your own boss's skin, weapons, vehicles. And some of these look completely ridiculous. You can have a heat signature weapon or camo on your vehicle, for instance. There's a galaxy one that looks like it's a fucking animated Call of Duty camo. There's a diamond one, a gold one, a lava one, and even more that I haven't unlocked yet. My only complaint with the weapons, though, is you cannot select exactly which part of the gun has that material. It automatically just gets placed on the entire gun, which is kind of unfortunate. It would have been cool if I could just apply the galaxy material strictly to the barrel instead of the entire gun. So what else is there to do in this game, and how is the open world in general? There are different side activities that you can take part in. One is called riding a shotgun, where you take out a group of enemies as a passenger in a vehicle using various different weapons depending on the mission you do. There's a side activity that has you stealing crates with a helicopter hook, and it has a few different missions, but they're all pretty much the same each time at the end of the day. Some of them to have you grabbing multiple crates in one mission, and some of them just having you grab one. In the open world, there are these history lesson things. You go up to this board, and then you have to find 4 other small boards in the circle. And the only reason I really did this was to unlock that weapon that's basically the dual-wield fists, like I was talking about earlier. The way fast travel works in this game is you have to take a picture of a key landmark at that certain area. It's always going to be marked on your map when you do it, and after that, you'll be able to fast travel to certain locations around the map. There's also various other random activities like collecting drug pallets, dumpster diving, all that jazz. The open world doesn't really feel all that alive, if I'm being honest. It feels very empty a lot of the time. When you go look at a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, for instance, if you go to a town, you see lots of NPC life, people are interacting with each other, it looks lived in, like you're actually just a part of that world. And well-crafted open worlds often give off that effect. In Saints Row, the world mostly feels like a playground to dump all of the content into at various locations. If you're just driving down the road, you hardly see any NPC activity on the sidewalks. Sometimes you don't even see very much traffic. I had that exact problem on a highway during the day one time. Ambient noise to make it sound like you're in a city or town is also just non-existent. This is what it sounds like when you're just standing out at various points throughout the map.
Hey, move it, dude.
That's not to say the world doesn't look good sometimes, though. There are moments where I stopped and looked at the way the sun was hitting the water and thought to myself, wow, that looks nice. But they were definitely few and far between. I know Saints Row has never been known to have these insanely immersive worlds, but considering this is a reboot, it would have been the perfect chance to come out with a bang and really blow people away with the open world, but sadly, this won't really do it for a lot of people. So coming up on the end here, I want to talk about the game's optimization and just some issues, bugs, oversights, and questionable design choices that I came across throughout my time playing this game. And I've experienced a lot, let's just say that. Some of these are things that you probably won't see any other review of this game cover because I somehow am fairly decent at finding bugs or problems in video games, and I can absolutely tell when something is off. But we'll start off with some of the more common ones first. The Take Me to Church mission, I had to replay 3 different times because it kept getting stuck in loading screens. The first time I completed it, I sat through the cutscene, and at the very end of the cutscene when it was supposed to load back into gameplay, it just didn't load back into gameplay and I had to redo the entire mission because of it, which was unfortunate. The second time I did it, I got put into a loading screen when I was going to the second part of the shootout, had to restart the entire mission. And this is no short mission, there's like 3 separate parts to it. It's one of the more impactful early game missions too. This might be fixed by now after some patches. I'm not sure if there was a patch in that time or a hotfix that took place, but that was extremely frustrating. Another time, when I was doing the choplifting activity, I started it up and my helicopter just sat there and I was locked in place. Couldn't even pause the game. I had to just completely restart it from the dashboard. So those are some very noticeable problems that were completely game breaking. Luckily though, other than those 3 occurrences, I haven't had any other progress halting bugs throughout the rest of my playthrough. I've seen Saints Row be compared to Cyberpunk when it first launched in terms of bugs, and no, it's not that bad at all. Not even close to what Cyberpunk was. Cyberpunk had way more issues on console than Saints Row does. Cyberpunk was not even playable on the old gen consoles. So to compare Saints Row to that, I feel is a bit unfair. But now for some not so game breaking things, but just things that don't work correctly or have been poorly implemented perhaps. One of the skills has you pull out a revolver and quickly take down 4 enemies like it's Red Dead Redemption. The first time I used this skill, it worked fine. It gave me a revolver with 4 shots and I took down 4 enemies. The second time I used up my flow and tried to activate it, it gave me a revolver with no ammo. So the skill doesn't work right at the moment. It doesn't give you bullets to fire after the first usage of it. So you're essentially just standing there, pants down, dick in hand, and going, well, what the fuck am I going to do with this? So I instantly took that skill off and probably will never use it again. The shield skill that I mainly use that gives you a big health boost, if you try to activate it again while you already have a shield active, the game will take away your flow like you activated the power up, but you won't actually get another shield for it. You have to wait until the first shield completely depletes before activating it again to get the effect, which is fine, but then just don't let me activate the skill in general. Don't just take away my flow and give me nothing for it. So that seems like it's a bit sloppily implemented. The weapon wheel is kind of a nuisance sometimes to take out the right weapon. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to take out the sniper rifle. I would open the weapon wheel, quickly point to the sniper and let go, and he would pull out pistols or something. You really have to like take your time with it, opening the wheel, having it open for a second, pointing directly to the weapon you want, and then letting go. It's not like in GTA 5 where you can do a quick swap if you're familiar with the menu. That will not work here at all. It's rather clunky. It also doesn't slow down time like it does in virtually every other game that has a weapon wheel. Another issue that I noticed was with the dual wield perk. Now, I don't know if this is just buggy or poorly implemented, but if you go and equip the dual wield perk and take out your pistols or SMGs, the game will work fine. You'll have 2 weapons. If you then go and get into a vehicle, Obviously, you can't dual wield in a vehicle, so you'll drive with one of the weapons instead of having two of them. If you then get out of the vehicle, your character will still have only one weapon in their hand. They won't automatically take out two weapons, even though you have the dual wield perk on. So you have to then swap to another weapon and then back to the SMGs or pistols to properly dual wield them again, which is just very annoying. And another thing that goes along with this, if you're dual wielding weapons and get into a vehicle, the game will just take away a magazine of your ammo because you can only use one gun while driving instead of two, so you have half the total ammo available to you before having to reload. But then when you get back out of the car, the ammo doesn't return to you, so you lose it, and you'll have to reload again to get full ammo for dual wielding. Which isn't the end of the world because ammo is very easy to come by, but it's just the principles of it that you come to expect to work properly. So basically, every time you get out of a vehicle, you have to, number one, swap weapons to make them dual wielded again, and then you have to reload the weapon because it takes away your ammo. And while we're on the topic of weapons, I guess we'll talk about this one now as well. As much as I love the weapon customization in this game, there is one major, and I mean major problem with a few minor ones. There is no way to save a customization blueprint. Say you spend 20 minutes or so tweaking your weapon appearance just to get it the way you want it. There's no way to then save that as a blueprint so you can, number one, equip it later, but number two, make multiple blueprints for the same weapon without customizing it all over again. And it also seems like there's a problem with weapon customization just saving entirely. I made my revolvers gold one time, but after hopping off the game and getting on for another play session the next day, the customization just didn't save and I was left with default revolver colors. The visual mods that we talked about earlier, where you can take the appearance of one weapon and slap it onto another weapon, also don't work properly. Let's say I want to make the Thompson have the visual appearance of the MP7. I can do that and it will work, but if I enter a mission of some sort, the game will instead just give me the default MP7 gun instead of the visual appearance with the Thompson stats. And so I'll have to go over to the gun shop to change it again after the mission's over. And another problem with visual mods is that the weapon abilities sometimes transfer over to the other gun. Using the same example, if you have the visual mod for the MP7 applied to the Thompson, you'll get the armor-piercing rounds of the Thompson to shred enemies super quickly, but you'll also get the shocker ammo from the MP7 ability if you have it unlocked. So you'll be going around shooting incendiary, shock, or bleed rounds that are also armor-piercing. You'll have both abilities, which absolutely just fucking shreds enemies. But since it's supposed to be just a visual mod, I don't think it's intended to be this way, as fun as it is to play with. And yet another thing I noticed was with the pistol visual mods. For some reason, you can't make other pistols have the visual mod of the KA-1 Cobra pistol. I wanted to make the Idolite pistol have the appearance of the KA-1 Cobra, but that's not possible. I can make it look like every other pistol but the KA-1 Cobra for some reason. It's just like they forgot about that one. And the KA-1 Cobra, I can give that one the appearance of the Idolite pistol, but not vice versa. These are just the tiny details in games that I can notice right away if they're not working properly. If something is bugged or not working properly with a certain mechanic, I will definitely notice it right away. The UI can also be very misleading in this game. It basically gets stuck on the previous objective in the upper left corner. So for example, you might go into one of the criminal venture threat areas and it might say destroy police vans, when in reality, you have to find enemy gang cars to blow them up. And as you blow up gang cars, the game will count as you're blowing up police vans for some reason, so it can confuse you a lot of the time. In terms of how the game runs, the performance is kind of all over the place. There are like 6 or so graphics modes in Saints Row between 1080p, 1440, and 4K with FPS or quality modes for each. I played the game mostly through the 1440p high FPS mode, and it holds a high frame rate for the most part. Aside from a few areas where you can really notice the drops, like in the church it tends to drop quite often for instance. And for a game that doesn't really look exactly graphically intensive, I feel it could have been optimized a bit better, because it's not exactly the prettiest game on the market by any means. So to wrap things up here, I want to give my final thoughts on the Saints Row Reboot and answer the question, is it worth buying? I'm just really confused as to who this game is made for exactly. Like, who is it marketed to? Because a lot of the more mature humor has been cut back. Like, Rim Jobs is now Jim Robs, and Freckle Bitches, the parody of Wendy's, is now called just FBs. Not that having the original names would suddenly make it an outstanding game, but you just have to question who they were trying to market this to. You could argue that it's for the younger Gen Z audience, but even as a Gen Zer myself, a majority of the jokes and humor just don't land. I can't help but wonder why they didn't instead go down the reboot route of the Modern Warfare series, where they brought back the fan favorite characters just in a different universe with a different story. I think that would have worked out very well for Saints Row, bringing back Johnny Gat, Pierce, Shaundi, maybe even having them look a little bit different than they did in those older games, but still retaining the same sort of personality that they had. Having new characters in a reboot can be a hit or miss if the characters aren't very good, and for the Saints Row Reboot, unfortunately, it's the latter. But to tell you the truth, not even the old cast would have made the game successful, because the game itself just doesn't innovate anything really. It's not much different gameplay-wise from the Saints Row games from decades ago. Again, I'm going to make the comparison to the Modern Warfare 2019 reboot. You can absolutely see the major enhancements that were made to Modern Warfare 2019 from the previous Modern Warfare games. And they're even talking about similar time frames too, about 10 years between Saints Row 4 and the reboot and Modern Warfare 3 and its reboot. The engine is vastly overhauled for the new Modern Warfare to make it feel brand new. The graphics are all better, the lighting is better, the sound design is better, the animations look way more crisp and realistic. Just everything about the new Modern Warfare game is a step over the older games, at least from a tech perspective. I honestly can't say the same thing about the Saints Row 2022 reboot. It just feels like the old Saints Row from years ago with minor differences in the combat. And to some, those differences aren't even upgrades. Which to me, someone who loves open world action games, is extremely disappointed because there's such a big gap in the market for a game in the style of GTA Online. Could you imagine a brand new Saints Row game with a massive focus on multiplayer, creating your gang, expanding your empire? They had a really good setup even with the Criminal Ventures kind of thing going on. Having that play out in a multiplayer setting with tons of other players could have had so much potential, but unfortunately no one seems to want to make a game that is similar to GTA Online. Should you go out and pay full price for this game? Absolutely not. Wait a few months for it to drop to like 20 or 30 bucks, and then you can decide if you want to pick it up or not. Despite everything negative I've said, there are some fun moments to be had, and you can still have fun with the game. It's just not going to completely blow you away, and I don't think it's worth 60 bucks in my opinion. Shit, it might even be 70 bucks. Definitely don't pay 70 for it. But that is going to wrap up my review of Saints Row. If you made it this far and watched the entire review, I want to say thank you so much. I don't typically do review videos for new games all that often, but it is something that I'm very passionate about when the time does come around. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to drop it a like, even if you dislike the game I am reviewing. And maybe even consider subscribing to the channel for more content. And as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.